Hello everyone, welcome to Winged Horse Designs. I'm Donna Goodwin. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator located in Brookings, South Dakota. Today I'm going to work with showing you a couple tips on doing two different very simple alcohol ink style backgrounds. Last week we did this, whoa, bad lighting. We did this card embossing on waxed paper and then sponging over it to create a really soft background. So I am going to, during the live, that went out to Irene. And for those of you who came back in on the replay and liked, commented, and shared, this is going out to Irma O. I'm just going to use the last initials so that we can protect your privacy as much as possible. Oops, there we go. And I think I'm live, so I'll just keep talking. There's a tab covering up some other stuff here, and so there we go. I'll see if I can get to it that way. So I'm going to change cameras, and we're going to go ahead and get started. There we go. So this was the card that went out last week to Irene and is going out this week to Irma O. And Irma, I need your mailing address to send this to you. So if you'll reach out to me through direct messenger on Facebook or through my email or something like that, you'll find links, those types of links down in the description. This is the card we're doing today. So I'm going to show you two different ways to do these alcohol backgrounds. And then I like to do some show and tell. I got this card from Betty. So Betty sent me this lovely card. How does she know I love cabins? I grew up in Colorado, so of course I love mountains and cabins. And this is in some lovely greens with a real pretty little delicate mat behind that. And then on the inside, she says, thank you ever so much. So thank you for this card, Betty. Now, our alcohol markers. So this is kind of bothering me that I have this little piece ribbon up here that I'm not used to seeing because it's blocking everything I am used to seeing, but we'll work with it. So I'm going to start with this one because it takes a little bit of time to dry, and then this one doesn't take any time at all to dry. So we'll start with this one's the messy one, so we'll do the messy one first. All the measurements are in the description, so you won't need to write those down. Good morning, Eileen. Until you need to deliver meals. Well, you can always come back and watch the rest of it on replay. I'm using a stamp set that's been in the catalog for a while now. It's been in a couple catalogs actually, called Color and Contour, and I like it because it's got these whimsical type of flowers, but this particular one here kind of reminds me of a Shasta daisy, and I love Shasta daisies because they come in all different colors. We're only going to use the outline, and we're going to use this little outline of a leaf and the splatters. And then for the sentiment, I chose thank you for everything. And it is a photopolymer set, so remind me when we get to stamping to bring in my foam mat so that I have something. This has a cushion, so I'm not used to using that, but I need to bring this in so that the rest of you know you need something underneath it. If you don't have a thick foam mat, a magazine will work. A mouse pad, anything that gives you a little bit of cushion on these photopolymer clear stamps. The inks that we're using today, I have one returning in color that's in our core line, Berry Burst. That matches up really nice with Old Olive for the leaf. And then a new in color, Wild Wheat, which is kind of a, it's not really yellow, it's not really brown, it's kind of got a hint of green in it. So it's a different kind of color. And we're going to work with, we're going to work with the alcohol markers to do this technique. And that's why I say they're simple, because it is simple and it has a little bit less of a mess. We're also going to use some Versamark for our embossing. So our cardstock measurements, like I said, they're in the description, won't need to write them down. 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, scored in the middle at 4 1/4. I'm going to bring in my bone folder and give that a really good crease. and set it aside. And then I chose the wild wheat. So here you can see it's a different color. I think I'm going to fall in love with it more in the fall than in the spring. But as you can see, it makes a beautiful matte color. So I'll probably be using it mostly as a background matte during the spring and summer. This measures 3 5/8 of an inch by 4 7/8 of an inch. For those of you who like measurements. For those of you who don't like measurements, it's just a smidge larger than the piece we're going to work on for the front that measures 3.5 inches by 4 3/4. And then you can see that I'm actually going to mount it right to the edge and just have a wider border on the edge versus putting it center like we tend to do all the time. And then of course we need a piece that's 4 by 5 1/4 for the inside of our card. So I'm going to start with this one. And you know what? Unprepared as usual. I need a second piece so I can show you both ways of doing this card. So I'm going to cut a piece down. I have a lot of 4 by 5 1/4 inch pieces in there. I'm going to cut this down to 3.5 by 4 3/4. So that we have 2 pieces to work with. Okay, so let's start with the messy one. I'm going to bring in some paper towels to protect my desk a little bit. I'm running out of space here. And I'm going to bring in a clear block. You want kind of a bigger block than what you're going to need. Now this is about the same size, a little bit smaller than the paper, but you need about that size. And I like to clean mine before I start with some alcohol. I just have a little spray bottle from the dollar store. And I filled it up with alcohol and I labeled it so I wouldn't accidentally use water when I think I'm using alcohol or alcohol when I think I'm using water. And I'm just going to give my block a really good clean. And I'm going to go ahead and clean both sides. And what I want to do is I just want to make sure that this alcohol technique will work really nicely for me by having a clean block that doesn't have any fingerprints all over it. So I'm going to bring in the markers. We're going to use it has 2 tips. It has a kind of a writing tip and kind of a paintbrush tip. We're going to use the paintbrush tips. And I'm going to start with the light berry burst, and I'm going to use the flat side of this versus the tip, and I'm going to scribble it on my block. Let me put this underneath so that it shows up a little bit better. And we're just going to scribble it on the block, not even being precise. Then I'm going to come in with the dark. Then I'm going to switch over to Old Olive, and I'm going to start with the dark. I got a little bit more berry burst on there than probably we needed. And then I'm going to finish it off with the light. So I went light, dark, dark, light. And it's kind of hard to see the light in there, but it's there. So I'm going to move this aside. I'm actually going to put it on my mat because the block kind of acts the same as the photopolymer stamps. You need a little bit of a cushion. And I'm going to try and protect the rest of my work surface. I'm going to take my alcohol and I'm going to spray it over the top of this block. And I want it to have enough liquid to cause the alcohol ink markers to bleed, kind of like watercolor, but not so much that it'll saturate the paper or just bleed too much into each other. So I'm going to give this a good spray, and that looks like enough. You can see how it's starting to blend together. Whoops. You can see how it's starting to blend together. So we're going to bring our mat and our cardstock in, and we're just going to flip it over. And what I'm going to look for, I flip it over to see how those colors started bleeding together. Could have used a little more extra alcohol up there, but I'm just going to let it sit there for a minute and let these colors just kind of blend. And when I lift it off, you have what looks like a watercolor wash, but we've done it with alcohol. So this is going to be dry very, very quickly. It's just plain isopropyl alcohol that you get from the pharmacy section of either the drugstore or Walmart or wherever you're going. I use 91%, 90% or 91% isopropyl alcohol. It's not necessary to use that high a concentration of alcohol. I just like it for crafting because it dries even faster. The higher the alcohol content, the faster it dries. So let's do our other background piece. And we're going to do the same thing, but we're just going to put it directly on the paper. So we're going to start with the light. And so you're going to see the difference between adding extra alcohol to it to cause it to bleed and just putting a background down. So we're putting down the light. I'm not being precise. And then I'm going to come in with the dark. This time, because we're not adding alcohol, I'm going to go over and I'm going to kind of blend the two together. Then I'm going to come in with my dark old olive and I'm going to go over this a little bit. There'll be some blending. And then I'm going to finish with the light on the bottom. It looks like my light's getting a little bit dry. I'm going to close these up tight to help keep them from drying out. And so there's our two different backgrounds that we have so far. And then I'm going to come in with Versamark and we're going to stamp on these. And this is already, it's a little bit damp, but not too bad. So we'll start with this one first. And this is where I need my foam mat so that I can stamp with these. So I'm just going to stamp in Versamark and I'm going to stamp a few flowers on and off of the background. And then I'm going to come in and stamp some leaves coming down into the green. Now I know I'm going to put my sentiment. I opted to put the sentiment directly on rather than another piece popping it up. So I do need to leave a little bit of space for that to fit on there. And then we'll put one more in here. And we'll add our powder. And did you catch this? I forgot to use my embossing buddy, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully there's not too much static on this card stock, and we won't end up with embossing powder anywhere we don't want it. We got pretty lucky. The only place I see some embossing powder I don't want it is right up there in the corner. I'm just going to take a soft brush. Oh, and here's a little bit right here. So I'm just going to brush that off. That's the important part, is to get the powder on while the Versamark's still wet. We still have a little bit of time to heat that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the second piece. We'll go this way. If you're not new to me and you don't know where to find me, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and a web page, all at Winged Horse Designs. Oh, I still need this. So this time, let's remember to use the embossing putty. This takes off the static electricity so that the embossing powder will only stick where the wet ink is. I'll come back in with our flower. And with our leaves. add our embossing powder to this. And I'm just going ahead and dumping the whole jar because I just have my little piece of copy paper here that I use as a funnel to put it back in the jar. And this is much better. Well, we got a little piece right there. But then we didn't end up with quite so much. So I'll set that aside to heat. We're still going to need this for a little bit more stamping. Now I'm actually going to bring in a couple pieces that I already did the embossing on. So this is the one with the wash by adding extra alcohol so it gives it a softer look. And this is the one where we just went super simple and just scribbled with the alcohol markers on our cardstock. So I'm going to do a little bit more stamping. I'm going to bring in this wild wheat. And I'm just going to do some speckles along the green just to give it a little bit more interest. But I am going to stamp off because this is kind of an intense color. Well, not real intense, but I want it to be a little more subtle than that. So I'm just going to stamp randomly directly over everything on here. Even where the sentiment's going to go. So we'll bring in the other piece and do the same thing. It's a super gorgeous day here in Brookings, South Dakota, so everyone's outside after we've had a few days of rain. Should start hearing lawnmowers here pretty soon. So that just gives me a little bit of background on those. And I'm going to come in with Berry Burst and stamp my sentiment. And I'm going to stamp it directly over the green. Now you don't need to put grid paper around your foam mat. I do it because I need the lines to be able to stamp straight. And even then, sometimes I don't get it straight. There we go. So I'm just stamping directly over that. And so you see the sentiment gets a little bit, I got a little bit too much embossing down too low here, but you can still read it. And if you're enjoying this, please do like, comment, and share. I like the comments. And toward the end of the video, after I do questions and answers, I will go in and do a live drawing, and the drawing tool that's associated with this streaming service I use called StreamYard does pull from comments. So there's my sentiment. So the front is basically done. And then on the inside, I'll stamp this flower. Now you notice I didn't clean it, and that's okay because it's just Versamark ink on it. And all Versamark does really is just slow down the drying process because it's meant to be a watermark ink. And then I'm going to bring in Old Olive and stamp some leaves. And then I bring in my alcohol markers and color this directly, but I have a piece that I've already started, and we're just going to finish the one last leaf. And here I find it easier to work with the pencil side. Sometimes the whole thing comes off. So sometimes the cap's on really tight and the whole thing comes off, and I'm just going to use some pliers to help me with some extra hands. And then just push it back in where it belongs. I like to start with my light, but you can color any way that you like. I like to, so for the ladies out there, you'll totally get this. I like to lay down my base coat. So think of putting on some makeup. You're putting on your base coat, and then you got to come in with your contour and your highlighters. And for you guys, you just have to remember where the light source is coming from. And I'm just kind of using a flicking motion when I add these in to blend the dark into the light. I come back with the light to blend them in some more. And as it dries, it will look a lot more blended like it does over here. So there's the inside for our 2 cards. I do have another set of cards I want to show you that uses the alcohol markers to color, but to color 2 different ways. Good morning, Irma. If you're just joining, please do. I announced at the beginning that you won this card from last week. So please reach out to me either through direct messenger on Facebook or via email or something. You'll find all those links in the description so that and give me your mailing address so I can send you that card. So now it's time to put these cards together. So I think we're going to work with this one because it's my favorite. I like the one that bleeds a little bit more, and I'm just simply going to glue this to my mat. And if you're joining us on replay, welcome. You know, I was going to ask a question. I forgot to put it in there. I was kind of late to the game as usual. Just so that all of you get to know me pretty well, but I don't really get to know any of you that well, unless you happen to be local to Brookings, South Dakota, and you come to my classes here. So I was going to ask, what's your favorite candy? Put in the comments, what's your favorite candy? For me, if it's chocolate, it's got to be good. White chocolate, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, I don't care, just chocolate. And I'm going to put this actually in the kind of the bottom left corner. And because not everything has to be centered on our card. You're not that late, Brenda. I think most of you have seen this technique before. If you're one of my Ollie, what do I want to call you, students? If you're one of the ladies who follow me on Ollie and take my classes that I offer through Ollie, if you're not familiar with Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, it's a great program. If you did Ollie, we did this last fall. We did lots of different ways, including the couple I'm going to show you. And then let's bring in, here they are. Let's bring in some of the 2023 to 2025 glossy dots. We've got Pebbled Path, Wild Wheat that looks kind of more yellow in the dots. Obviously, Moody Mauve is my favorite. Copper Clay and Boho Blue. I'm going to go ahead and use the Moody Mauve, even though I used Berry Burst here, because it just seems to go really nice, and the Wild Wheat goes really nice here. So the nice thing about these is none of them are higher than the other ones. A lot of times you'll notice I always use the smaller ones because they mail easier. See's Candy. Ooh, I haven't had any of those in a long time. So I'm just going to go ahead and start using up the bigger ones because they really are just as flat as the smaller ones in these particular embellishments. And let's put one down here. And I would finish this card off exactly the same way so that you end up with one by just using the alcohol markers and scribbling them on cardstock. Gives you Technically, it's an alcohol ink background because we're using alcohol ink markers. And then this one, we scribbled the markers onto a clear block. If you're joining us on replay, just to recap. Then we misted it with some alcohol that I just had in a spray bottle, and then applied the block to the cardstock. You can do this and get this watercolor wash look if you're using alcohol. If you were using water, this particular cardstock doesn't take water very well, so you'd want to switch to a watercolor paper for that. So this is this week's card. I hope you enjoy them. These are some cards I did that are posting over on a Crafters Collaboration today. I have a friend in Oklahoma, and we collaborate each month and do something different. And this is my contribution to today over at a Crafters Collaboration. You can find that on Facebook and Instagram. This one, I stamped it in Memento ink. And I thought because we were having all this rain, I was inspired to do a card with rain. And then I flipped it over. This is on vellum. I flipped the vellum over, and I used my alcohol markers to color it in on the vellum, and then flip it back over, stamped my raindrops, and mounted it on white. You do need to mount it on white so you can see it, and then put a pebbled path frame around it. This one is stamped directly on the cardstock and colored directly on cardstock. So you can see, kind of like with these two, where'd the other one go? This one directly on the cardstock is a little bit darker and brighter. And this one on the vellum gives us this kind of softer color look on that as well. So that's another way to use your alcohol markers. That's a lot of fun. I am going to switch cameras real quick. There we go. And I don't see any questions yet. So I'm just, we'll just kind of acknowledge who's here today during the live. And if you're here during the replay, you can still like, comment, and share, and I will monitor those throughout the next couple of days. So I have here, Eileen was here in the beginning. She may or may not still be here. Irma has joined us. Thank you. Brenda's here. She says she's late. She's never late. Maybe she wasn't here at the very beginning, but she wasn't late. And Irma likes See's candy. I haven't had See's candy in a long time. I can remember that was always such a treat, the See's candy, especially the assorted chocolates. And of course, I don't know about the rest of you, but I always went straight for the caramels. Those were my favorite, the caramel. They're still my favorite of the See's candies. And thank you. You like the cards. That's great. I am going to queue up the giveaway. We're going to see out of those of you who are here and have commented. So you got a few seconds here to comment. Go ahead and jump in and do that. I'm going to bring that up, and then I'll queue it up, and we'll see who's going to get the card. All right, there's 3 entries, it says. So there's 3 of you commenting. So one of the 3 of you. Brenda. Okay, congratulations, Brenda. You're going to get this card. I'm actually going to see Brenda tomorrow, so I'm going to hand deliver this to her. And let's see, there we go. So I hope you enjoy. Oops, there we go. A lot of things to run on this StreamYard thing, but I love StreamYard. It's wonderful because it gives me all these options. I hope you enjoyed these cards. Friday is an upload day versus a live day. And if you haven't already seen it, you're going to see it again through me. And my version might be a little different from others. We're going to do the floating strips technique. And that's really super simple and a lot of fun to do. So look for that upload coming on Friday. I will be back next Monday. What am I doing next Monday? I am doing watercolor lifting again. We did it a few weeks ago. I'm going to do watercolor lifting again. A little bit different version of watercolor lifting. So that'll be my live next Monday at 10 a.m. Central Time, right here either on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching me from. So have a wonderful week, everyone. The sun is shining. Summer is here. We're all very happy. Happy trails. Bye-bye.